Welcome to True Echo, where real power rises from resilience, and every story echoes with justice, dignity, and truth. In today's gripping narrative, we follow a brilliant black CEO who steps into a luxury jet showroom only to face open mockery, racism, and public humiliation. But what happens next will leave you stunned. This is a story of pride, prejudice, and ultimate power. Stay with us as we unveil a journey that proves strength is never silent. Jessica Morgan adjusted the sleeves of her crisp white shirt and took a slow breath as she stared at the glittering row of private jets gleaming beneath the late morning sun. This was it. The moment she had worked toward her entire life. She wasn't here for attention. She wasn't here to make a scene. Jessica, at just 34, was the CEO of Morgan Tech, a billion-dollar tech firm with offices in 5 countries and partnerships with the world's largest hardware companies. And today, she'd finally decided it was time to invest in the next big step for her company, a Gulfstream G650. The showroom was located at the edge of the downtown airport, surrounded by runways and private hangars. It was designed to impress: polished marble floors, glass-paneled walls, velvet ropes, ambient lighting. But none of that fazed Jessica. She had already walked boardrooms more intimidating than this. Yet the moment she stepped inside, she felt the shift. The air in the room changed, not visibly, not loudly, but sharply enough that someone like her, someone who had grown up being told she didn't look like she belonged, could feel it instantly. There was a subtle hush. The click of keys at the receptionist's desk slowed. A well-dressed man by the coffee bar stopped mid-sip. Jessica had seen that look before. The raised eyebrows. The skeptical glances. The quiet, wordless question, what is she doing here? She continued forward, walking with measured calm toward the centerpiece of the showroom, the G650. Her sneakers made soft sounds against the marble, a contrast to the sharp heels echoing elsewhere in the hall. She didn't wear diamonds. No watch. Her only accessory was a phone in her back pocket and the confidence of someone who didn't need to prove herself. Still, Greg Reynolds, the showroom's top sales rep, was already watching her with mild disdain from across the floor. "Security's gotten lax," he muttered to his colleague without looking away. The young woman next to him chuckled. "Probably wants to take some pics for Instagram." Jessica paused before the plane, running her hand lightly along the polished hull. She imagined her engineering team flying out to client sites with ease. No delays. No cramped commercial flights. Just efficiency, security, and control. Then came the voice. "Ma'am. This isn't a public display. If you're lost, the airport terminal is across the lot." She turned. A man in a tailored black suit stood with folded arms, his name tag flashing, Greg Reynolds, Senior Sales Executive. "I'm not lost," Jessica said, her voice calm. "I'm here to speak to someone about purchasing a G650. Greg blinked. He looked her up and down once more, his expression unreadable. "This model," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need one," Jessica replied. "I called yesterday. Spoke to someone named Karen. She said I could walk in." Greg nodded, then smirked. "Right. Karen should have told you that walk-ins usually meet with reception first. But that's okay. I'll handle it." He turned toward the plane and gestured dramatically. "So. You said you're interested in this aircraft?" "Yes," Jessica said, ignoring his condescension. "I'd like to discuss the purchase process." Greg let out a quiet chuckle. "Sure. Well, let's start with some basics. You do realize this isn't a demo unit, right? This isn't a showroom dummy, it's a $65 million aircraft." Jessica gave a slight smile. "I'm aware." Greg tilted his head, clearly enjoying himself. "And do you happen to know what the monthly maintenance on something like this runs? Or the pilot costs? Or storage fees? Or are we dreaming a little today?" The surrounding clients began to take interest. A few leaned in. One whispered something to her companion, who stifled a laugh. The atmosphere shifted from condescending to outright mockery. Jessica, however, stood her ground. Her expression didn't change. "Are you going to show me the cabin layout and specs, Mr. Reynolds?" she asked, "or do I need to speak to someone who knows how to deal with actual buyers?" Greg's smile faltered, just for a second. But then he leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, sweetheart," he said. "You're out of your league. No offense, but this space is for elite clients. Real ones. People with connections, capital, pedigree. He paused, eyes flicking to her shoes, "you don't fit the profile." There it was. The quiet dagger. The kind Jessica had faced her whole life. She could have turned and left. Could have said nothing, walked out with her dignity intact, and gone to another dealer. But instead, Jessica's expression hardened. And in her calm, deliberate tone, she said, "I built Morgan Tech from my garage. I've spoken at World Tech Summits. I've been invited to the White House. And I am 10 seconds away from calling your corporate office and letting them know that their most expensive model is being pitched by a man who thinks racism is part of the customer experience." Greg blinked. The room went silent. "I didn't mean," he started. "You did," Jessica said. "And you said it to the wrong person." And that's when the front doors swung open. A tall man in a sharp gray suit walked in, briefcase in one hand, sunglasses in the other. "Jessica," he called out. Jessica turned. Her face lit up. "Marcus." Greg glanced between them, suddenly uneasy. Marcus Bennett walked straight to her and gave her a hug. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "Meeting with the FAA ran long. I heard this was the best place in town to buy a jet, but judging from the vibe, maybe I heard wrong." He looked around slowly, eyes landing on Greg with a practiced legal chill. Jessica smiled. "Marcus, this is Greg. He thinks I wandered in from the sidewalk." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh really?" Greg swallowed hard. Jessica turned to Greg. "You want to continue this sale, or should I start dialing the media?" Greg's smile was gone. But Jessica's was just beginning. Greg's posture changed in an instant. The smug grin had vanished, replaced with something Jessica hadn't seen before on him, uncertainty. He looked at Marcus, then back to Jessica, as if reassessing everything he'd assumed. "Miss Morgan," Greg said slowly, the mocking tone gone, replaced by forced professionalism. "Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. I'd be happy to walk you through the G650 specifications now." Jessica didn't answer right away. She let the silence hang, a quiet assertion of power. Marcus stepped forward, casually removing his sunglasses and letting them dangle from one hand. "No need," Marcus said, his voice calm but unmistakably authoritative. "We'll be in touch with the owner of this establishment later. For now, we'd like to take a look at the aircraft. Privately. Without commentary." Greg hesitated. "Sir, I'll need to get authorization for that." "Then go get it," Jessica said plainly. Greg nodded stiffly and turned, nearly tripping over himself as he walked toward the manager's office. The onlookers who had previously smirked and whispered were now quiet. Some turned away in discomfort, others openly stared with new interest. Jessica looked to Marcus, her expression unreadable. "I wasn't expecting you," she said softly. Marcus shrugged. "I figured you might need backup today. And I'm glad I came when I did. That guy." He tilted his head toward Greg's direction. "He's a lawsuit waiting to happen." Jessica chuckled under her breath, but there was no humor in it. "You'd think after all these years, I'd be numb to it. But it still cuts the same." Marcus nodded. "It should cut. It's wrong. And the worst part is how comfortable people like him feel saying that stuff aloud, because no one's made them pay for it. Until now. Greg re-emerged a few minutes later with a nervous-looking manager in tow. The manager, a graying man in his 50s with a wide smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, extended his hand quickly. "Miss Morgan, Mr. Bennett, apologies for any misunderstanding. Please allow me to personally walk you through the aircraft. Greg will step aside for now." Jessica didn't take the offered hand. "No need," she said. "We'll look on our own. I know what I'm looking for." The manager's smile faltered. "Of course. Please take your time." He stepped aside. Jessica and Marcus approached the G650, and a staff member silently unlocked the cabin door. The luxurious interior opened up before them, polished wood paneling, soft leather seats, ambient lighting, and the quiet hum of climate control already engaged. It was everything Jessica expected. She didn't speak for a long moment as she walked through the cabin, letting her fingertips graze the polished armrests. Then she turned to Marcus. "This isn't just about a jet. I know. This is about every time someone like me is told we don't belong. Every time we're measured by our skin, not our skill." Marcus nodded solemnly. "They think their titles, their tailored suits, their six-figure watches give them the right to judge us before we open our mouths," Jessica said, her voice growing firmer. "But they don't see what we've built. What we've survived. What we've earned." Outside the plane, Greg lingered near the reception desk, watching them closely. His hands fidgeted with the edge of his jacket. He could feel the tide turning. The manager had already pulled him aside to whisper, "Don't say another word. We're going to have to deal with this very carefully." But Greg couldn't help it. He watched Jessica move confidently through the cabin and something about it gnawed at his pride. It wasn't just that she had money. It was that she carried herself like someone who didn't need anyone's validation. And that shook him. Back inside, Jessica turned to Marcus. "I'm going to make the purchase." Marcus arched a brow. "From here?" "No," she said flatly. "Not after the way I was treated. But I will make the purchase, and I'll make sure the story of how I was treated here is known in every corner of this industry." Marcus smiled. "I'll make the calls." Jessica nodded. "And we're not stopping at media. I want a lawsuit. Discrimination. Defamation. Damage to reputation. Emotional distress." Marcus gave a satisfied nod. "We'll start building the case immediately. And I know just the witness to help us." Jessica looked surprised. "Witness?" Marcus grinned. "Young woman on staff. Intern. She texted me while we were talking to Greg. Said she's been documenting incidents like this quietly because she's seen it happen to others, too. Her name's Emily Parker." Jessica's expression changed from anger to grim purpose. "Let's talk to her. Today." Just then, the manager returned. "Miss Morgan," he said carefully, "if you're ready, we can begin discussing financing." Jessica turned toward him, her voice sharp and unshakable. "I'm not purchasing from this company. Not now. Not ever." The manager blinked, stunned. May I ask why?" Marcus stepped forward. "You can ask, but you already know." The manager paled. "I assure you, we take this seriously." Jessica's tone cut through the showroom like glass. "You don't take anything seriously until someone with a platform holds you accountable. And that time has come." She didn't wait for a response. She stepped down from the aircraft, walked across the showroom floor with Marcus beside her, and made her way to the front doors. Every eye in the room followed her. No one said a word. But in their silence was a growing storm. And Jessica Morgan had just ignited it. The moment Jessica and Marcus stepped outside the showroom and into the bright, open sunlight, the weight that had been bearing down on her chest lifted slightly, but only slightly. The battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. "I want to file everything today," Jessica said, slipping into the passenger seat of Marcus's car. "I'm done giving people like Greg and companies like that a pass. If we don't make this public, they'll just do it to someone else." Marcus gave her a sharp nod. "Then we go full throttle." Back at his law office that afternoon, the strategy session began. Jessica sat at the polished wood conference table, her face calm but her body taut with focus. Marcus brought out his laptop and a notepad thick with notes. He had already flagged potential legal violations, discriminatory business practices, public humiliation, verbal harassment, emotional distress, and a failure by the company to uphold basic anti-discrimination policies. But they needed more than legal theory. They needed proof. That's when the door opened and a timid voice called out, "Mr. Bennett." A young woman stepped in, early 20s, glasses, blazer too big for her small frame. It was Emily Parker, the intern Marcus had mentioned earlier. "Miss Parker," Marcus greeted warmly, "please come in." She closed the door quietly and walked toward the table with nervous energy. Jessica offered her a reassuring smile. "Thank you for being willing to talk." Emily nodded. "Of course. I've seen too much to stay quiet." She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. "I don't want to get anyone fired, but what happened to you? That wasn't just rude. It was wrong. And it keeps happening. I've recorded it more than once." She tapped through her voice memos and played one. Instantly, the room filled with Greg's unmistakable voice. "Who does she think she is? Young black woman walks in here like she owns the place. Wearing sneakers. Come on. Just looking for clout for social media." Then came another male voice, one Jessica recognized as the wealthy customer from earlier, Richard Davis. "You don't belong here, girl. Know your place." Jessica's hand clenched tightly as the words echoed through the office. Her jaw tensed, but her expression remained composed. Emily stopped the recording and looked up. "I didn't know what to do. I started recording incidents a couple months ago just in case someone needed evidence one day. I guess today was that day." Marcus exhaled slowly, his eyes burning with satisfaction. "Emily, would you be willing to testify if this goes to trial?" Emily hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes. People like that don't deserve to hide behind titles and money. And this company needs to change." Jessica leaned forward. "Thank you. What you're doing matters. You're helping more than just me." Emily left the office soon after, her hands still trembling but her eyes bright with a sense of purpose. Once she was gone, Marcus closed his laptop and turned to Jessica. "We've got them. Between her recording, your experience, and the company's failure to intervene, this is a solid case. But be prepared, once this goes public, the backlash will come hard." Jessica didn't flinch. "Let it. I didn't become a CEO by backing down." The next morning, Jessica's story broke. Marcus had provided the recordings, the transcripts, and a full timeline to a respected journalist who had covered corporate discrimination stories in the past. Within hours, headlines began flooding the internet. Black female CEO humiliated at Jet showroom, then shuts them down with one move. Know your place, racist rant caught on audio, CEO fights back. Discrimination in luxury. How one black tech executive is taking on a powerful industry. Social media erupted. Comments flooded in, some in disbelief, others furious at the treatment Jessica endured. Prominent figures from both business and entertainment voiced their support. At Seal Voices, shameful. At Jessica Morgan Tech is one of the sharpest minds in tech. That showroom just embarrassed themselves on a global stage. At Real Talk Biz, every entrepreneur knows appearances mean nothing. The fact that this still happens in 2025 is infuriating. The company tried to respond. A brief, lukewarm statement was posted to their website the next afternoon. We deeply regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred. We value all customers and are conducting an internal review. But it was too little, too late. Marcus held a press conference outside the courthouse steps, flanked by Jessica and several other black business leaders. This is not about a single insult, he declared into the sea of microphones. This is about a pattern of exclusion, of humiliation, and of systemic arrogance that assumes wealth and power look a certain way. That stops today. Jessica stood beside him, looking directly into the cameras. They judged me based on my skin, not my success. They mocked me for dressing simply, as though I had to prove my worth by wearing gold or arriving in a Bentley. I don't want a public apology, I want a cultural shift. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. And all the while, Jessica remained poised, radiating the calm strength that had carried her through every boardroom, every battle, and every betrayal. That night, the showroom's corporate parent issued a second, more urgent statement. We are horrified by the conduct reported at our downtown showroom. Effective immediately, we have suspended all staff involved and launched a comprehensive diversity and inclusion overhaul across all branches. But again, Jessica wasn't moved by PR. She wanted justice. In court. On record. Greg Reynolds. He'd already been fired. Richard Davis. His hotel chain's PR team was in damage control mode. And the courtroom? It was next. Jessica knew exactly what the stakes were. This wasn't just about a jet. It was about how far people like her had come, and how much farther they were still forced to go. She was ready to make them all see it. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as Jessica Morgan entered, flanked by Marcus and two associates from his firm. The room, packed with journalists, legal observers, and a handful of nervous showroom executives, felt more like a high-profile trial than a discrimination case. But that's exactly what Jessica wanted. This wasn't just her fight anymore. As she took her seat at the plaintiff's table, across from a defense team headed by the slick-talking corporate attorney Andrew Collins, Jessica felt the weight of 1,000 invisible eyes watching, people who had been silenced, ignored, underestimated. Marcus leaned in. They're going to try to spin this as a miscommunication. Stay steady. Jessica gave him a nod, her jaw set with quiet determination. The judge, Eleanor Mitchell, entered moments later. She was known for her no-nonsense demeanor and commitment to fairness. The courtroom rose, then sat. Let's proceed, she said, eyeing both legal teams. Andrew Collins rose first. He adjusted his tie, exhaled, and launched into what was clearly a well-rehearsed opening. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, he began, what we have here is a regrettable incident, yes, but not a systemic issue. Our clients, the showroom and its parent company, pride themselves on diversity and customer satisfaction. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding, fueled by assumptions on both sides. Jessica didn't flinch, but Marcus's lip curled slightly. This was not malice, Andrew continued. It was a matter of unclear communication and a failure to recognize a unique client's needs. Nothing more. We intend to show that while mistakes were made, they were not indicative of discrimination. Judge Mitchell raised a brow. Let's see what the evidence says, Mr. Collins. Marcus rose smoothly, hands behind his back. Your Honor, he said firmly, this case is not about a simple mistake. This is about public humiliation rooted in prejudice. It's about a successful black woman being ridiculed and dismissed because she didn't look like the image of wealth that certain individuals in that showroom expected. He paused, letting his words hang. We have audio recordings. Witnesses. A clear pattern of behavior. We intend to prove beyond any doubt that the discrimination was real, deliberate, and publicly damaging. Jessica's eyes scanned the jury, diverse, curious, a few already nodding. The trial began in earnest. Emily Parker was called first. She walked nervously to the witness stand, but her voice was clear. I heard Greg Reynolds mocking Miss Morgan's appearance before he even spoke to her. He said things like, "Probably just here for Instagram," and laughed about her sneakers. Did anyone stop him? Marcus asked. Emily shook her head. No. Everyone laughed with him. And after that? When she confronted him, he doubled down. Told her she didn't belong. That she should leave before she embarrassed herself. Marcus played the audio. Greg's voice filled the room. You'd better leave now before your dignity is completely destroyed. Several jurors visibly winced. When it ended, Judge Mitchell leaned forward. Miss Parker, were these kinds of remarks common? Emily nodded. Yes, especially toward customers who didn't look like they belonged. Most people stayed quiet. I didn't want to, not anymore. Marcus gave her a grateful nod. Thank you, Miss Parker. No further questions. The defense attempted to rattle Emily on cross-examination, painting her as a disgruntled intern. But she didn't budge. She held her ground, quiet but firm, and by the end of it, Jessica saw something powerful, truth standing up to power. The next few witnesses testified to Jessica's reputation in the tech world, executives, colleagues, a well-known investor who'd once said Morgan Tech's AI platform would change everything. The defense tried to suggest Jessica had overreacted. Miss Morgan, Andrew Collins asked on cross, you're an influential woman, a CEO. Couldn't this have simply been an unfortunate misunderstanding, misinterpreted because of heightened sensitivity? Jessica turned to the jury. I've been followed in stores. Ignored at luxury hotels. Talked down to at industry conferences. Every time, I told myself, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe I'm imagining it. But this time. They said it out loud. They mocked me in front of a crowd. She paused, her voice unwavering. I'm not here because I'm sensitive. I'm here because I'm done being silent. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge seemed to sit straighter. When closing arguments arrived, Marcus didn't hold back. This isn't just about Jessica Morgan, he said, pacing slowly in front of the jury. This is about every person who's walked into a room and been treated as less than because they didn't fit someone's expectations. Jessica didn't need to prove she could afford a jet. The only thing she should have needed was basic human respect. And she was denied that. He let that hang, then continued. This company's response wasn't remorse. It was denial. Not until the press got involved did they suddenly care. That is not accountability. That is damage control. Jessica watched the jury carefully. Some nodded. Others scribbled notes. One older woman blinked hard and gave Jessica a small, encouraging smile. And then, it was time. Judge Mitchell gave her final instructions. The jury retired to deliberate. The minutes dragged like hours. Jessica sat silent, fingers laced together. Marcus said nothing, simply placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Finally, the jury returned. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Jessica Morgan. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The foreperson continued, we award damages in the amount of $500,000. And we recommend immediate internal reform be mandated across all showrooms under the parent company's name. Jessica exhaled slowly, the tightness in her chest finally breaking. Judge Mitchell looked over the room, then added in her own voice. And this court recommends Mr. Greg Reynolds be immediately terminated for violating standards of professional conduct. The gavel came down. Justice had been served. The courtroom emptied slowly, as reporters surged outside to file stories and spectators whispered about what they just witnessed. Jessica sat still for a moment, letting the verdict wash over her, not as a moment of victory, but as one of transformation. Marcus leaned closer. You did it. You stood your ground. Jessica didn't smile. Not yet. We did it. But now comes the part they never see, the aftermath. Outside, the courthouse steps were already flooded with press. Microphones were thrust forward. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions over one another. "Miss Morgan, what do you have to say to your supporters? What do you think this case means for black professionals in America? Do you plan to continue the legal battle with the company's corporate branch?" Jessica held her hand up gently and stepped in front of the crowd. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She simply spoke with the same calm confidence that had carried her through the ordeal. "This wasn't about money," she said. "This was about dignity. And about the fact that in 2025, too many people still believe you can judge a person's worth by their clothes, their skin, or their silence." She took a breath. "Let me be clear, what happened to me wasn't unique. It happens every day in boardrooms, showrooms, restaurants, and banks. The only thing different this time was that I said, 'Enough.' And I made sure you heard me." The crowd erupted in applause. Later that week, the fallout from the trial became national news. Morning shows, news segments, business panels, all debating how a high-end aviation brand could have allowed such unchecked bias to thrive. Jetstream luxury showroom hit with $500,000 verdict over racial discrimination. Black CEO turns racist showroom incident into landmark court victory. Social media celebrates, she bought the jet and took the company down. Greg Reynolds, once the company's top salesman, was quietly fired the next day. His termination made local news, and soon his LinkedIn profile disappeared entirely. Sources later reported that he'd been rejected from 2 other dealerships within a week. Jessica hadn't spoken his name since the verdict. She didn't need to. But justice wasn't enough. Jessica wanted change. She and Marcus met privately with the board of the parent company. They arrived at the corporate headquarters in tailored suits and clear intentions. "Let's skip the apologies," Jessica said to the boardroom of stiff-faced executives. "You already lost in court. Now I want to talk about how you're going to fix the culture you allowed to grow in your showrooms." The chairman, a silver-haired man with apologetic eyes, shifted in his chair. "Miss Morgan, we are deeply sorry for what happened. We've already fired the responsible parties and issued a public statement." "That's not enough," Marcus cut in. "What steps are you taking internally?" Jessica laid out her terms: mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees, a third-party audit of customer service practices, a diversity task force with real authority, not a figurehead, and a written public apology published in all major aviation and business publications. "We can work with you," the chairman said after a long pause. "We'll implement every measure you've outlined." Jessica leaned forward. "Good. Because if you don't, I'll go back on every morning show in the country and remind people exactly what your company stands for." And they knew she meant it. A week later, the company released a powerful apology. It included Jessica's name and acknowledged the harm she'd endured. It also laid out their plans for meaningful change, including hiring practices and anonymous reporting channels. For many, it was just another story of justice delivered. But for Jessica, it was more. The following month, she returned, not to the same jet showroom, but to a competitor's. One she had already researched. One known for its respectful service and inclusive approach. The showroom manager, Linda Harris, greeted her warmly at the door. "Miss Morgan," Linda said, shaking her hand firmly. "We're honored to have you." No one stared. No one whispered. And no one questioned her value. Jessica smiled, letting the weight fall from her shoulders. "Thank you. I'm here to buy." She toured the Gulfstream again, this time without the taint of judgment hanging in the air. She asked the questions she'd prepared. She took her time. And when she was done, she signed the check. The pen felt lighter in her hand this time, as if her entire journey had reshaped what it meant to win. Linda handed her a folder. "We'll handle the delivery and onboarding. Congratulations, Miss Morgan." Outside, Marcus waited with crossed arms and a proud smirk. "You did it." Jessica looked up at the jet's wings, glinting in the sun. "No," she said, "we did it. And so did every person who's ever been underestimated, ignored, or disrespected, just because they didn't fit someone else's picture of power." They walked away together, the wind rising gently around them. Jessica didn't need the applause. Or the headlines. Or even the victory speeches. What she needed was already hers. Her voice. Her dignity. Her story. The days following Jessica's purchase passed quietly, but only on the surface. Underneath the calm was a ripple spreading fast, reaching corners of corporate America that rarely faced such direct accountability. The story had gone viral. But more than that, it had become personal for millions. Online forums lit up with professionals sharing their own stories. Black executives. Latina entrepreneurs. Asian American scientists. Indigenous tech founders. All of them knew Jessica's walk into that showroom because they'd taken the same steps somewhere else, and been met with the same looks. One post summed it up best. Jessica Morgan didn't just walk into a jet showroom. She walked into history. But not everyone was inspired. In a modest apartment on the city's west side, Greg Reynolds sat slumped on a couch, the glow of the TV screen washing over his pale face. His phone buzzed constantly, not with new opportunities, but notifications of articles mentioning his name. Fired showroom rep at Center of Discrimination case silent amid fallout. Where is Greg Reynolds now? He turned it off. The screen went dark, reflecting back his exhausted, regretful expression. In the silence, his mistake was loud. He had lost his job. His professional network had abandoned him. He couldn't walk into a high-end dealership anymore without heads turning in judgment. All from a few words he once spoke without thought, words that, until now, had never cost him anything. Until Jessica Morgan. Meanwhile, Richard Davis, the once mocking tycoon, sat in his corner office atop the Davis Hospitality Group tower, staring blankly out the window. His PR team had scrambled after the trial to distance his name from the incident. But the damage was done. Sponsors had backed out of his luxury conference. A keynote speech was quietly cancelled. And a major investor pulled funding from one of his upcoming hotel projects. But what haunted him most wasn't business. It was that moment, Jessica, standing calmly, confidently, and leveling her phone so he could see her bank balance. He couldn't shake the image. Couldn't stop hearing his own voice saying, "People like you should know your place." She hadn't cursed. She hadn't yelled. She had looked him straight in the eye and proven every one of his assumptions wrong. That was a lesson he would carry forever. Back at Morgan Tech HQ, Jessica sat in a conference room with her leadership team. The jet deal had been finalized. Delivery was scheduled for the following month. A champagne toast had been planned, but she'd cancelled it. "Let's skip the celebration," she said, hands clasped on the table. "Let's do something that actually matters." Her CTO, a young Indian woman named Priya, leaned forward. "Like what?" Jessica smiled. "Let's launch an initiative. I want to sponsor 10 women of color in tech this year, college students, entrepreneurs, inventors, whatever stage they're in. We'll provide mentorship, seed money, and direct access to our platform." Her operations director raised an eyebrow. "That's doable. What will we call it?" Jessica paused. Then said simply, "Project Worth." The room fell silent in thought. Then heads nodded. One by one, her team got behind it. Within a week, Project Worth had a website, a funding pool, and a dedicated team. Within a month, the first 3 women were already on board. Jessica read every application personally. One stood out, a 19-year-old black girl from Georgia who wrote, "I always thought the corporate world wasn't for people like me, until I saw your story, and I realized it could be." Jessica printed that one and pinned it to her office wall. One Saturday morning, Jessica stood by the hangar at the airport, her Gulfstream G650 finally delivered. Its sleek body gleamed under the sun. The pilot greeted her respectfully, already aware of who she was. Everyone on the ground crew had heard the story. Many had watched the trial live stream. One of the techs, a Latino man in his 30s, approached her after the tour. "Miss Morgan," he said, "I just wanted to say, my daughter wants to be an engineer. And after watching you on TV, she told me, if she can buy a jet, I can build one." Jessica smiled softly, her chest tightening in the best way. "Tell her I believe in her," she said. He nodded, his voice catching. "She already believes in you." That evening, Jessica returned home to a quiet apartment, the city lights glowing beneath her balcony. Marcus called just as she was pouring tea. "Hey, superstar," he said. "How does it feel to own a jet and spark a national conversation?" Jessica chuckled. "Heavy. But right. Thought about what's next." She glanced toward her office, where new partnership proposals from social justice organizations waited on her desk. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I know I'm not done." Marcus went quiet for a moment. "There's something powerful about the way you handled it. You didn't destroy anyone. You just showed the truth, and let the world see what happens when a person refuses to shrink." Jessica's smile faded into something deeper, resolve. "I wasn't trying to go viral," she said. "I was trying to be seen. Fully. And if that helps someone else stand up, then maybe all of this, every insult, every look, every humiliation, was worth it." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Jessica Morgan, you're not just a CEO. You're a movement." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because somewhere out there, another girl was watching. And tomorrow, she would walk into her own version of that showroom, with her head held high. 2 months had passed since the verdict, and yet the resonance of Jessica Morgan's story hadn't faded, it had only deepened. Headlines still cited her court victory as a landmark moment in corporate accountability. Universities studied her case in business ethics classes. And social media still echoed with 3 simple words that had become synonymous with her legacy. "I belong here." Jessica stood now before a packed auditorium, the keynote speaker at the National Women of Color in Business Summit. The crowd was electric, students, CEOs, educators, and entrepreneurs all gathered to hear her speak. Marcus watched from the front row, proud as ever, his phone tilted slightly to capture a photo. Behind him sat Emily Parker, no longer the timid intern, now working as a full-time associate at Marcus's firm and recently admitted to law school. Jessica stepped up to the podium and took a moment before speaking. She didn't need a teleprompter. Her words were lived, not written. "When I walked into that jet showroom," she began, her voice steady, "they didn't see a CEO. They didn't see a founder. They didn't see someone who had built a billion-dollar tech company from a laptop and a garage. She let that settle. They saw a young black woman in sneakers. And to them, that meant I didn't belong." Murmurs of agreement and quiet nods moved through the crowd. They judged me on what they could see. But the real problem was what they couldn't see. They couldn't see perseverance. Or discipline. Or nights spent sleeping under my desk. They couldn't see the investors I had pitched to, the deals I'd closed, the failures I'd overcome. Because they weren't looking. Her eyes swept the audience. "And that's what we must change." A wave of applause surged through the room. "I didn't fight back for revenge," she continued. "I fought back because I wanted the next generation to walk into a showroom, or a boardroom, and not have to defend their right to be there. I wanted respect to be automatic, not conditional. Based on character, not clothing. Based on substance, not stereotypes." Thunderous applause erupted, followed by a standing ovation. Jessica smiled, her eyes briefly misting. And if you ever find yourself in a room where they look at you like you don't belong, I want you to remember this: you belong wherever your hard work has taken you. Period. The crowd rose to their feet. Camera flashes lit the air like fireworks. When she stepped off the stage, dozens of women surged toward her, not just to shake her hand, but to thank her. Some cried. Some brought daughters. All of them understood what her story had meant. Later that night, Jessica returned home to find a letter waiting on her desk. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant cursive on cream paper. She opened it slowly. It read: Dear Miss Morgan. I watched the trial. I saw myself in the defense's side, and I didn't like it. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I've stepped down from my position and begun working with diversity organizations to ensure this never happens again. You reminded me what dignity looks like. Thank you. Richard Davis. Jessica stared at the note for a long moment. Not because she forgave him, but because it meant the message had struck deep, even in the hearts of those who had once been part of the problem. Weeks later, the jet was finally ready. Jessica stood on the tarmac, Marcus beside her, a soft breeze rolling across the runway. Her team clapped as the engines roared to life. On the side of the sleek Gulfstream G650, beneath the standard serial number, was a custom script in elegant lettering. Project Worth. Marcus chuckled. You know, most people name their jets after Greek gods or famous mountains. Jessica smirked. I wanted mine named after a promise. A promise? She looked at him. That every person who's ever been underestimated will one day have their worth recognized, not because they shouted the loudest, but because they stood the tallest. As the jet began to taxi down the runway for a ceremonial tour flight, Jessica climbed the stairs, turned at the top, and looked back at the people clapping below, her team, her friends, her partners in justice. And for the first time since the day she walked into that showroom, she felt light. Not because she'd proven anything, but because she no longer needed to. Inside a modest classroom in Detroit, a group of high school girls sat in front of a projector as their teacher clicked play on a video titled "The CEO Who Faced Racism Buying a Jet, and Got Everyone Fired." At the front of the class, a young girl named Kiana raised her hand. "Miss Thompson," she said. "Do you think I could be like her someday?" The teacher smiled, walked over, and pointed to the screen. She didn't become her overnight. She chose to be her, every day, in every room. Kiana looked back at the glowing screen, her eyes full of fire. And across the country, somewhere above the clouds, Jessica Morgan soared quietly, her jet cutting across the sky like a silent answer. Yes, Kiana. Yes, you can. Thank you for watching this powerful journey of resilience, justice, and transformation. Jessica Morgan's story reminds us all that no one should ever have to prove their worth based on appearance or background. As she said, we belong where our work has taken us. If you believe in standing up for dignity, for equality, and for justice, subscribe to True Echo now. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments, have you ever been underestimated, and what did you do about it? Until next time, stay true. Stay strong. And let your echo be heard.